I'm not sure where to start, but I guess I'll just dive right into it. My name's Jake, and I used to think I had a pretty solid marriage with my wife, Claire. We were married for 5 years, and on the surface, everything seemed fine. We had a nice house in a decent neighborhood, a couple of dogs, and I thought we were happy together. But then I started noticing some things that didn't quite add up. At first, it was little stuff. Claire was spending more time on her phone, texting late at night, and being vague about her plans. She'd go out with friends more often, but when I asked who they were, she'd give me the same tired line about needing to unwind or catch up with her old college buddies. Sure, I wanted her to have her space, but something just felt off. The vibe shifted. It was as if she was putting up walls between us, and it hit me like a punch in the gut, even if I didn't want to believe it. The real slap in the face came one evening when I got home early from work. I was excited to surprise her with dinner, a nice home-cooked meal and a little time together. But when I walked through the door, I found her in our living room, phone in hand, whispering and giggling like a schoolgirl. My heart skipped a beat. I had never heard that sound from her like that in years. When I stepped closer, she quickly hung up and shot me a nervous smile. I tried to ignore the sinking feeling in my stomach, chalking it up to my imagination running wild. Then came the day that changed everything. I was cleaning out the attic, looking for old holiday decorations, when I stumbled upon a box of Claire's old keepsakes. Among the items was a stack of letters, sweet, innocent ones from her college days, but tucked in the bottom was a folded piece of paper that caught my eye. It was a letter from a rising actor named Ryan Carter. I vaguely recognized his name from a few movies that had been making headlines. My blood ran cold as I read the words spilling over with longing and affection. That was it. The moment I realized Claire was not just being distant, she was cheating on me with someone who had the world at his feet. It hurt me to the core. I felt betrayed, angry, and a swirl of emotions that I can't put into words. I spent the rest of the night pacing around the house, trying to wrap my head around the betrayal. I wanted to confront her right away, but I needed proof, not just my suspicions. Over the next few days, I did some digging. I set up a fake social media account to follow Claire and Ryan. I scrolled through the pictures, the flirty messages, and realized they had been seeing each other for months. I was furious. The way she smiled in those photos, the way she looked so carefree, made my blood boil. The last thing I wanted was to confront her with just accusations. I needed to have undeniable proof. So I bided my time. I watched her every move, waiting for the right moment to confront her and show her I knew. When that moment finally came, I was both nervous and ready. I gathered my thoughts, prepared myself for her likely denials, and braced for impact. The day I confronted her was a whirlwind. She had just returned from a dinner with friends when I dropped the bomb. I watched her face drain of color as I laid out the evidence I had found, her texting, the letters, and even a few photos I had taken of her with Ryan. The confrontation was intense. She was defensive at first, claiming it was all in the past and that I was overreacting. But as I pressed her further, her excuses began to crumble. It was gut-wrenching to see her squirm, to hear her lies tumble out of her mouth even as I presented the facts. The woman I thought I knew was unraveling before me. She was angry, and I could see the bitterness in her eyes. No longer the girl I fell in love with, but someone desperate to deflect blame. I felt like I was drowning in my emotions, anger, betrayal, sadness, all swirling together as I realized how deeply I had been deceived. That night felt like a nightmare that wouldn't end. The emotional fallout left me reeling. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. All I could do was replay the confrontation over and over in my mind. I had to decide what to do next, and it was going to be easy. I didn't just want to walk away without a plan. I wanted to take a stand and show Claire that her actions had consequences. Little did I know, that was only the beginning. I needed to figure out how to take that pain and turn it into something else, a way to reclaim my life and maybe even a little revenge. I knew I wasn't just dealing with my wife's betrayal. I was up against a rising star in Hollywood, and I had no intention of letting either of them off easy. After the confrontation, I was a mess. I'd spent countless hours replaying every moment with Claire, her laughter, her sweet kisses, all of it tainted now by the knowledge of her betrayal. I was filled with a mix of anger and sadness, and I had to decide what to do next. I could feel a fire growing inside me, a need for justice, not just for myself, but for the sanctity of our relationship that she had so callously tossed aside. I started by researching Ryan Carter, the actor who had so easily stolen my wife's heart. From what I could gather, he was the golden boy of Hollywood, handsome, charming, and seemingly untouchable. He had a string of recent successes and was on the brink of becoming a household name. I couldn't help but feel a sense of envy mixed with rage. How could someone like him be so careless with someone else's marriage? It was infuriating. After digging deeper, I discovered that Ryan wasn't just famous. He was also known for getting into scandals. There were whispers about his partying lifestyle, rumors of flings, and even a few public altercations that had made tabloid headlines. I had an idea forming in my mind, and it was one that sent chills down my spine. If Claire thought she could have her Hollywood dreams with this guy, then she was in for a rude awakening. I could shatter that illusion in an instant. I spent the next few days compiling everything I could find about Ryan, his past indiscretions, interviews where he had slipped up, and any dirt I could unearth. I knew that if I wanted to hurt him, I had to strike while the iron was hot. The tabloids and gossip sites were always on the lookout for fresh news, especially about stars like him. I wanted to expose him, to bring his secrets to light, and I was going to do it in a way that couldn't be traced back to me. I crafted an anonymous tip to a popular gossip column, detailing everything I had found. I wrote about his reckless behavior, the wild parties, and hinted at the fact that he had been seeing a married woman. The moment I hit the send button, I felt a rush of adrenaline. I was no longer the victim. I was taking control of the narrative. For weeks, I watched as the gossip site published my tips. Ryan's career took a hit. Articles started popping up about his questionable behavior, and whispers of his romantic entanglements began to spread like wildfire. The media picked up on it, and soon he was the talk of the town, but not for the right reasons. I felt a sense of satisfaction each time I saw his name plastered across the screen in a negative light. The fallout was significant. He lost endorsements, and his public appearances became scarce. The tabloids were relentless, and I was thrilled to see how quickly he was sinking under the weight of the scandals. Claire, on the other hand, was oblivious at first. She had her head in the clouds, convinced that her relationship with Ryan was untouchable. During this time, I also began to distance myself from her. I started going out more, spending time with friends and focusing on myself. It felt good to reclaim my life, to not be the shadow of a man whose wife was carrying on an affair. I found solace in the company of friends who reminded me that I was worth more than the betrayal I had experienced. I began to rebuild my confidence, and it was during this period of self-discovery that I realized I didn't want to go back to the way things were. But just as I was starting to feel good about my plan, things took a turn. Claire confronted me one night after a particularly rough week for Ryan. She had been reading the articles and could feel the tension between us. The moment she asked me if I knew anything about the rumors, my heart raced. I had to tread carefully. I played it cool, pretending I didn't know much. "I just hope he gets his act together," I said, feigning concern. But Claire was relentless. She could sense the distance between us and wanted to know what I really thought. It was a dangerous game, and I had to keep my cards close to my chest. As the weeks passed, I could see the cracks forming in Claire's facade. She wasn't the bubbly woman I had married. She was stressed and anxious, constantly checking her phone for updates about Ryan. The affair that had once seemed so glamorous was starting to show its ugly side. She was feeling the heat of the scandal, and I knew it was only a matter of time before the truth began to unravel completely. It was during one of these confrontational evenings that I decided to up the ante. I wanted her to feel the weight of her choices, see the full picture of what she had done. I began dropping hints about how she would be better off without Ryan, subtly guiding her to the realization that the man she had chosen over me was now a liability. Every moment I watched her struggle with her decisions was another moment of validation for me. I felt powerful, and for the first Time in a long while, I was no longer the victim in this mess. I was the one pulling the strings, the one who had the upper hand. And as hard as it was to admit, I was enjoying it. As I continued my clandestine campaign against Ryan, I noticed that Claire was becoming increasingly erratic. The confident, social woman I had once loved was now frazzled and paranoid. She spent hours scrolling through her phone, obsessing over every rumor and article that surfaced about Ryan. She would get these frantic messages from her friends who were filling her in on the latest gossip, and I could see the stress eating away at her. The glimmer of the Hollywood life she had envisioned was dimming, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. One evening, as we sat across from each other at the dinner table, the tension was palpable. Claire was trying to maintain a facade of normalcy, but I could see the cracks in her composure. She picked at her food, glancing at her phone every few minutes, waiting for some update about Ryan. I decided it was time to confront her about the state of our marriage, to force her to face the consequences of her choices. "Claire, we need to talk," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. She looked up, her eyes wide. "About what, Jake?" I took a deep breath. "About us, about what's been happening." She sighed and the defensiveness crept back into her voice. "What's there to talk about? I told you it's all in the past. You know how the media gets. They blow everything out of proportion." I rolled my eyes at her typical denial, but I pressed on. "Is it really over? You're still in contact with him, aren't you?" The silence that followed was deafening. I watched her face fall, the realization that she couldn't lie her way out of this one anymore. "I'm not talking to him like that," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's complicated." "Complicated? You're married, Claire. You broke your vows. You can't just act like it's nothing." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment I felt a flicker of sympathy. But it was quickly replaced with anger. She had made her choices, and I had no intention of letting her sidestep the reality of them. "Do you even know what you're doing to me?" I continued, my voice rising. "You're ruining our marriage for some fleeting fantasy. I deserve better than your lies and deceit." Tears streamed down her face as she tried to defend herself. "I didn't mean for it to happen. I was lonely and you were always working." "Lonely? Is that your excuse? You thought cheating was the answer." The hurt surged through me, bubbling over into fury. "You're not some innocent victim in this, Claire. You chose this." In that moment, it felt like years of pent-up frustration exploded between us. She tried to counter my accusations, but the arguments fell flat. I saw the pain in her eyes transform into anger, and it felt as if we were two strangers on opposite sides of an emotional battlefield. The confrontation left us both reeling. After a few tense hours of silence, I retreated to the living room, feeling drained. I knew I needed to keep the pressure on her, but I also had to be careful. I couldn't let her manipulate me into feeling sorry for her. I needed to keep my focus on the endgame. The next day, I had a plan. I decided to escalate my revenge by getting the attention of bigger media outlets. I focused my sights on the tabloids that had already picked up on Ryan's scandals. They were hungry for every morsel of gossip, and I had the perfect bait. I collected more evidence, diving deeper into Ryan's past and his questionable behavior. I knew his career was fragile. All I needed was a little push to send him crashing down. I crafted an anonymous tip that detailed not only his affair with Claire, but also included information about other women he had allegedly been with. I highlighted the red flags about his behavior and hinted at his substance abuse problems. I sent it to several high-profile tabloids, including ones I knew Ryan had connections with. My heart raced as I pressed send, but I felt that familiar rush of adrenaline coursing through me. Within days, the tip had gained traction. Articles began popping up about Ryan's alleged reckless behavior, and soon he was being scrutinized more than ever. The media frenzy was relentless, and I could see the tension mounting in Claire as she struggled to justify her actions. I watched as the news broke that Ryan's latest film was being pulled from release due to the growing scandal. His reputation was slipping away, and Claire was starting to realize that her dreams were crumbling right alongside him. I could see the panic in her eyes as she tried to salvage what was left of their relationship. One evening, she approached me with a determined look. "Jake, we need to talk about this," she said, her voice steady. I can't keep pretending like everything is okay. This isn't just about me and Ryan anymore. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, so you finally understand the mess you've created. Stop it. She snapped, her frustration boiling over. I'm serious. I don't want to lose you, but I don't know how to fix this. I thought I could have both my life with you and this excitement with him, but it's all falling apart. For a moment, I almost felt pity for her. Almost. But the bitterness quickly returned. You made your choice, Claire. You wanted that excitement, and now you're reaping what you've sown. Her expression shifted from desperation to anger, and I could see the fight in her eyes. You think this is funny, don't you? You're reveling in this. You want to watch me suffer. I stepped closer, locking eyes with her. This isn't about suffering, Claire. This is about you facing the consequences of your actions. I'm not going to let you walk away from this unscathed. In that moment, I realized there was no turning back. The dynamic had shifted. I was no longer the one begging for answers. It was Claire who was now scrambling to piece her life back together. I was determined to see this through to the end, no matter what it cost either of us. I had taken the first steps towards revenge, and I was hungry for more. As the days passed, the media circus surrounding Ryan's downfall became an almost daily spectacle. I relished in the fact that Claire was forced to confront the reality of what she had done and the impact it had on both of our lives. There was no escape for her now, and I was ready to watch as everything she had built began to crumble around her. The game was far from over, and I was just getting started. As the scandal around Ryan Carter intensified, the atmosphere at home became unbearably tense. Claire was unraveling, and I was both fascinated and repulsed by how quickly her facade was crumbling. Gone were the days when she could brush off my concerns or pretend everything was fine. Now, she was constantly checking her phone, her eyes darting nervously every time a notification chimed. I could see her stress manifesting in every interaction, and I couldn't help but feel a cruel sense of satisfaction. She was desperate to maintain her grip on a narrative that was slipping away faster than she could manage. I watched her talk frantically to her friends on the phone, her voice a frantic whisper as she tried to gauge how bad things really were. It was clear she was terrified of losing her dreams, not just of Ryan but of the glamorous life she had imagined for herself, one where she was the star, not the background player. Her grand fantasies were unspooling right in front of her, and I was reveling in the chaos of it all. One night, after a particularly brutal day of media attacks, on Ryan, Claire sat across from me at dinner, her hands trembling as she pushed food around her plate. I knew I had to press her to offer her a chance to explain herself one last time. So what happens now, Claire? She looked up, pain and frustration etched across her face. What do you mean? Is this what you wanted to be a punchline? I shot back, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. It's not about that, she snapped. I didn't think it would go this far. I thought it was just some fun distraction. It wasn't supposed to hurt anyone. Fun distraction, I repeated incredulously. You've destroyed our marriage for some fun. Do you even understand the gravity of what you've done? The tears streamed down her face as she finally let out the truth. I know, I'm sorry, Jake, I messed up. I just got caught up in it all. I thought I could handle it. Handle it? I spat, my anger boiling over. You think you can just say sorry and we can go back to the way things were? You crossed a line that can't be erased. She paused, wiping her tears. I don't know how to fix this. I didn't think I would get caught. I thought I could balance everything. I thought I could have you and him. But now it's all falling apart and I don't know what to do. I watched her break down, the woman who had once seemed so invincible now reduced to a fragile shell of herself. But despite my anger, I was still conflicted. Seeing her like this stirred something deep within me. Perhaps it was empathy or the remnants of love I still held for her. Yet that conflicted feeling didn't last long. Her tears were a facade, and I couldn't let her manipulate me into feeling sorry for her. Instead, I leaned back and steeled myself. You need to face the reality of your choices, Claire. You wanted to play with fire, and now you're burned. This is going to hurt, but it's time you accepted that you may have lost everything. The next few days were tense. I kept my distance, letting her stew in her own regret while I continued my secret campaign against Ryan. I had gotten wind that A major outlet was preparing to publish an even bigger exposé about him, a piece that would include interviews with women who had come forward claiming he had treated them poorly. The timing was perfect, and I made sure to feed them just enough information to keep them interested. As Claire's anxiety mounted, I could see her spiraling. She tried to reach out to Ryan, but it was clear he was distancing himself as the pressure mounted. I overheard her on the phone one evening pleading with him to take her back to make things right. She sounded desperate, a far cry from the confident woman who had first sought out a fling with him. "Jake, I need your support," she pleaded when she hung up, her voice shaky. "I can't do this alone." I looked at her, my heart hardening. "You made this bed, Claire. You need to lie in it. If you want to fix this, you need to start by being honest with yourself and with me. But I can't help you if you're still holding on to him." She stared at me in disbelief, the realization dawning on her that I was not going to swoop in to save her from her self-made disaster. "You're just going to leave me like this. You're going to let him win. What you think of as winning is completely warped," I replied, frustration boiling over. "You let him into our lives, and now you want me to comfort you while you watch everything collapse. This is not how it works." That night, as I lay in bed listening to her muffled sobs from the other room, I couldn't shake the feeling of triumph. I had taken control, and I wasn't going to let her guilt or sorrow sway me. I was determined to see this through. The next morning, I woke up to a barrage of notifications on my phone. The gossip column I had tipped off had published the exposé, and it was all over social media. The headline read, "Rising Star or Falling Idol, Ryan Carter's Dark Secrets Revealed." The article detailed everything from his alleged affairs to the way he had treated women. It was brutal, a complete character assassination that I had orchestrated with precise planning. I couldn't help but chuckle to myself as I read through the article. The fallout was immediate. Ryan was officially being dropped from his upcoming projects, and the world began to turn against him. I watched as Claire's face fell, her dreams of Hollywood stardom fading before her eyes. "Did you see this?" she shrieked, rushing into the room, phone in hand. "They're tearing him apart." "Yeah, I did," I replied, trying to mask the satisfaction in my voice. "This is insane. How could this happen?" I watched as panic set in. "What's wrong, Claire? Is this not the fairy tale you envisioned?" She shot me a look of disbelief, her voice cracking. "You did this. You're the reason this is happening." I shrugged, trying to appear indifferent. "I just wanted you to understand the consequences of your actions. Maybe now you'll finally see what kind of man you were chasing." She crumpled to the floor, sobs racking her body as reality came crashing down. The man she had risked everything for was gone, and in his place was a shattered image, a man whose reputation was in ruins. I felt a pang of something. Was it guilt? No, it was more like satisfaction mixed with a sense of justice. This was my revenge, and I was savoring every moment of it. But in the back of my mind, I knew that what this meant for Claire was only beginning to unfold. The consequences were just starting to ripple through our lives, and I was ready to see just how far this cascade would go. The days that followed Ryan's public downfall were a whirlwind of chaos. I had expected the media frenzy, but what I didn't anticipate was how deeply it would affect Claire. Watching her struggle through the fallout was like watching a slow-motion train wreck, gripping, horrifying, and impossible to look away from. Claire was in a constant state of anxiety, her phone buzzing with notifications that seemed to bring her further down. The headlines were relentless, and friends she had once confided in were now avoiding her like the plague. In a twisted way, I felt a sense of satisfaction watching her confront the reality of her choices. But there was also a part of me that recognized the emotional toll it was taking on her. One afternoon, I returned home to find Claire sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV. She hadn't even changed out of her pajamas, and her hair was a mess. It was clear that she hadn't taken care of herself in days. She looked up as I walked in, and the hollowness in her gaze sent an unfamiliar pang of guilt through me. "Jake," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, "I'm so lost." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my own emotions in check. "You wanted this life, Claire. You chased after it, and now you have to deal with the consequences." I didn't think it would come to this, she pleaded, her eyes welling with tears. I thought we could have fun, that I could have both. I never wanted to hurt you. Her words were filled with desperation, and I had to remind myself that this was not about me saving her. You made your choices, Claire. You wanted excitement, and now you're seeing the dark side of that world. You have to own it. I know, she said, her voice cracking, but I can't handle the shame. Everyone is talking about me. About us. I don't want to be remembered for this. Then maybe you should have thought about that before risking everything for some fling with a guy who isn't worth it, I shot back. She nodded, her head hanging low. I realize that now, she murmured, but I don't know how to fix this. I'm scared of losing everything, Jake. Scared? You should be terrified. You gave up your integrity for a moment of thrill. My voice rose as I pointed out the truth. What did you expect would happen? That you could cheat and everything would just go back to normal? I can't lose you, Jake. I don't want to lose you, she cried, and in that moment I saw a flicker of the woman I had once loved, but I quickly steeled my heart again. What do you want me to say? I asked. That everything is going to be okay, because it's not. You have a lot of repairs to make, and the first step is admitting you messed up. She wiped her tears and nodded, though her expression was still filled with despair. I know I need to make things right. I'll do whatever it takes. The next few days were a blur of sorrow and confrontation. Claire reached out to a few friends, trying to mend the bridges she had burned. I watched as she faced the judgment and scorn of those who had once adored her. It was hard to witness her earnest attempts at redemption, which only reinforced my desire for revenge. But as much as I relished her unease, I began to understand that this was more than just a game for me. It was about more than just hurting Ryan or making Claire feel the weight of her choices. It was about reclaiming my own sense of self-worth, my own identity stripped away by her betrayal. On a particularly stormy night, Claire and I found ourselves in the living room together. The rain pelted against the windows, creating an ambience that felt heavy with tension. I had spent the day meeting up with friends and trying to give Claire some space, but something about her sad demeanor drew me back. She sat curled up on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes red from crying. I know I ruined everything, she said in a small voice. I'm not asking for your forgiveness right now. I just want to know what's next. I studied her, searching for the sincerity in her words. What do you want, Claire? Do you want to try to fix this, or do you want to walk away? I don't want to walk away. I want to fix this, she said earnestly. I know it's going to take time, but I'll do whatever you need me to do. I want to earn your trust back. Trust? That's a tall order, I replied coolly. You shattered it pretty thoroughly. It's not going to be easy to rebuild. Claire nodded, her expression somber. I know, and I'll accept whatever you decide, but I need you to understand how serious I am about making things right. It was a moment of vulnerability unlike any I had seen from her before. The guilt that had been simmering inside me began to bubble up again, and I had to remind myself why I was doing this. Claire's words echoed in my mind, but they weren't enough to sway my resolve. I had to keep my distance to ensure that I did fall back into the same trap that had led to her betrayal in the first place. Maybe it's time for you to focus on yourself, Claire, I suggested cautiously. You need to figure out who you are without all the drama, without Ryan. Maybe that's the first step toward making things right. She nodded slowly, her eyes downcast. You're right. I need to rediscover myself. I thought I knew who I was, but I've lost sight of that. I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. Perhaps this was the turning point we both needed. I didn't know what the future held, but I could feel the tension between us shifting. For the first time, we weren't just husband and wife caught in a web of betrayal. We were two people trying to navigate the wreckage of our lives. In the days that followed, Claire took my advice and began to focus on herself. She signed up for a few local classes, started volunteering, and even reached out to family to reconnect. I could see the spark of determination in her eyes that hadn't been there before. It was hard to reconcile this new version of her with the woman I had confronted just weeks earlier. But while she was working on herself, I couldn't shake the feeling that I still needed to deliver a final blow to Ryan. I decided it was time to complete my revenge, to make sure he learned the consequences of messing with my life in the first place. So I contacted a few journalists I knew had been following the story closely. I wanted to ensure the narrative around him wasn't just a downward spiral. It needed to be an explosive ending. I wanted him to know that no matter how high he rose, he could fall just as quickly. And while Claire was working on herself, I would finish what I had started. I was no longer just fighting for my honor. I was fighting for my life and the sense of control that had been stripped away from me. The stage was set for the final act, and I was ready to watch the curtain fall. The final act of my revenge against Ryan wasn't just about him anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity and asserting my place in this chaotic narrative. As Claire worked diligently to rebuild herself, I prepared my last move. I had gathered enough information to make sure Ryan's fall from grace would be as spectacular as it was inevitable. I wrote up a detailed piece that exposed everything Ryan had tried so hard to sweep under the rug. It wasn't just the allegations of infidelity. It was the way he treated women, the late-night parties where drugs were rumored to flow freely, and the accounts of those who had been wronged by him. I crafted it carefully, weaving a narrative that painted him not just as a man caught in a scandal, but as someone who was fundamentally flawed, a predator hiding behind the Hollywood glamour. The moment I pressed send, I felt an exhilarating rush. This was it. I had taken back control of my story, and the thought of Ryan squirming under the weight of the truth was more satisfying than I could have imagined. The article hit the media, and the reaction was immediate. News outlets jumped on the opportunity to amplify the story. Ryan was back in the headlines, but this time it was for all the wrong reasons. The backlash was swift and merciless. Within days, he was dropped from his contracts, losing roles that had been his ticket to stardom. It was a beautiful spectacle, and I watched with a sense of vindication as the very foundations of his life crumbled. In the midst of this chaos, Claire was transforming. She took the time to reflect on her life, focusing on her passions, and I could see her spirit beginning to reignite. She was getting involved in community projects, volunteering at animal shelters, and reconnecting with friends she had neglected. I could tell she was trying to find her way back to the woman I once knew, and I admired her determination. One afternoon, she sat down with me, her expression earnest. "Jake, I want to thank you for being honest with me through all of this," she began. "I know I don't deserve it, but I appreciate you still being here. You're right, I needed to face what I had done." I nodded, feeling a sense of resolve. "You've got a long road ahead, Claire, but I've seen the changes you're making, and that's a start. Just remember, trust is hard to rebuild." "I understand that," she replied, her voice steady. "I do. Expect everything to go back to normal, but I want to work towards something better. I want to prove to you that I can be better." It was a bittersweet moment. I could feel a flicker of hope, but uncertainty still lingered. We had both been changed by this experience, and while she was trying to redeem herself, there was still a part of me that wasn't sure if I could ever fully forgive her. The wounds were still fresh, and the scars would take time to heal. As the weeks turned into months, the media continued to churn out stories about Ryan's downfall. I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of satisfaction and pity for him. He had become a cautionary tale, a reminder of the pitfalls of fame and the consequences of betrayal. But the more I watched him spiral, the more I realized I had no desire to engage further. My battle was over, and I felt a sense of closure. Claire and I began to find a new rhythm in our lives. We kept our conversations open and honest, sharing our struggles and fears. While we weren't back to where we had started, we were working on something new, an uncertain but hopeful future. One evening, as we sat outside on the porch watching the sunset, Claire turned to me with a soft smile. "I'm glad you're still here, Jake. I know I messed up, but I hope we can find a way to move forward together." Her words struck a chord, and I felt a flicker of warmth in my chest. "I want that too, Claire, but it's going to take time. Trust isn't built overnight." "I get it," she replied, her eyes sincere. "I'm committed to doing the work, and I hope you'll be there with me every step of the way." The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope. I had taken my pain and turned it into power, reclaiming my narrative while also allowing myself to consider the possibility of forgiveness. As we sat together, watching the sky shift from vibrant oranges to deep purples, I realized that perhaps this could be a new beginning for both of us. We were no longer defined by betrayal. We were two people ready to forge a new identity together. Life had thrown us into the depths of chaos, but we were fighting our way back together. And as the last rays of sunlight faded into the horizon, I couldn't help but feel that maybe, just maybe, we would emerge stronger on the other side.